Hey everybody, welcome to the first in what we plan to be a series of videos that is, we're calling Humanizing Work Snapshots, because like you, we're trying to humanize our own work. And so we thought we'd give you some insight into some steps we're taking to humanize things within the Humanizing Work company. A little meta, I get it, but hopefully we find that, that you find that a little bit useful. So to get into this, we decided to close our year strong with a good retrospective, and it's a retrospective across the entire year. So a lot of data to consume and to consider there. And so Richard volunteered to help shape the retro, and we thought we'd walk you through the steps we took and what stood out to us in this approach to doing a year-end retro.
I guess I'll start by explaining some of the choices I made for how I structured it, because you might want to do something similar with a big retro like this. When we're looking at a long time frame, in this case a whole year, recency bias is likely to be an issue. So I knew I wanted to do something that helped us get at what happened earlier in the year and put that in perspective. The other, I guess, thing I knew going into this was that I probably wanted to use the focus conversation or its structure, because that's our favorite way to reflect on a thing. So we're going to gather some data. We're going to gather some data about our feelings, our kind of internal state. We're going to interpret it together. We're going to make some decisions about what to do. So looking over a long period, timeline was the structure that I think made the most sense, but there's a lot that happens in a year. So in advance, I sent out homework for the three of us to think about the whole year. And one of the questions that I gave was, I get the exact words, what happened in 2021? Events, wins, accomplishments, challenges. And then I just had a list of January through December. And we each took time, probably a little over an hour each of us, to go through our calendars and emails and Slack and fill in some of just what happened. Not our judgments about it or anything, but just what happened. While I was doing that, I discovered I wanted to know some things that were more quantitative. So I ended up taking some snapshots of some product revenue graphs and our monthly sales and days with clients and all those kinds of things. And ended up dumping those on the board too, alongside where the other objective data was going to end up. I also asked a few other questions in the homework. Over the course of 2021, I changed the way I thought about ... During 21, I wish I'd spent more time ... And during 2021, I wish I'd spent less time. And then I also asked a question, which we ended up not using, what's already on the calendar or planned for 2022, other than public courses, just in case we got into planning in a little more detail further out into the year. I thought it'd be useful to have kind of the hard landscape of the year there. So I was just using my intuition about what kind of data might we want when we get together. And we each took time to collect that. Then the first thing we did when we got into the retro was build out all those yellow stickies that you can see in the Miro screen capture there, where we just would shout out a thing and somebody would and write it. And then somebody else would shout out a different thing and write that. And so we just collected the data. By doing the talking, then writing, we ensured that we weren't putting duplicates up there and we could ask clarifying questions. So that got us a bunch of shared data about the year. And we generated some other things that weren't in any of our notes in advance as we reminded each other of things, and got a bunch of data there. Then we moved on to sharing our notes about those three questions I asked about, like, how my thinking has changed over the year, what I wish I'd done more of, what I wish I'd done less of. Those all started out yellow. We realized in the middle that it'd be useful to tell who said what, so we assigned ourselves a color and color-coded our stickies, kind of like putting names on them. Peter, you want to describe what happened next?
Yeah, so there was this interesting point when we were talking about things we wished we had spent less time on and more time on in the previous year, where I felt like there was something for me to add there, but I couldn't put it into words. Like there was just something else below the surface that I couldn't express well. And so Richard said, well, what if we were to add a new category here, which is like, what else is in the background? And I think this was a key facilitator move, because there was something simmering for me and I couldn't express it well. And as soon as Richard framed it that way, I immediately had like 5 things. Like, these are other things that are impacting how I'm showing up at work and how I'm thinking about the previous year and what I'm hoping for in the next year. And there were, as each of us added those sticky notes, like there were times when I got pretty emotional sharing some things there that were impacting how things were going, where Angie got emotional, where Richard got emotional. We're like, these are the things that matter to us. And I do find it interesting that that wasn't in our original design, but you made that facilitator pivot to say, there's something here that we don't have in our current retro design that matters, that is deeply impacting how we reflect on the year and what we're hoping for in the future. So I wanted to call that out as something I'm grateful for, that Richard had the wherewithal to figure out a way to frame a useful question there, because that for me switched the retrospective into something that, honestly, at the moment I was just feeling some sadness about the year, even though there were lots of cool things to celebrate. And as soon as you added that, it allowed me to get that out and express it in a clear way, to where I felt heard by the team. I felt like, in fact, it even generated some insights as we kind of said, well, these are the things that are impacting. I don't know what to do about that. And there was this moment where I was like, I can sort of see, based on the collective stickies we collected in this area, I sort of see like a pinhole of light. Like, over here, here's how we might be able to address that thing that feels like a tension that's showing up for all of us. And then Richard was like, well, that's great. What is it? and then we spent, probably a good half hour to an hour just digging into, well, what might that thing be that breaks the conflict? And for me, that was the moment that the retrospective shifted emotionally from, there's some sadness about things we didn't do well this year, or that we want to do better for, or goals that we set that we didn't accomplish, to, wow, I'm really hopeful about the next year. Like, I can see how the next year will be even better. So that was, I think, a key move in the retro.
Mm-hmm. That really felt like a turning point for me. Angie, I'm curious what happened for you in that part.
It was a key turning point for me as well, but in a slightly different entry point. When we went to that question about what else was in the background, there was sort of a door open to expressing sadness. And when we started to do that, I felt a heaviness, not just from the emotion, but feeling like, wow, I had really wanted this retro to be a celebration. I thought that's what I needed to end the year well. And as we continued to talk and process emotion together, I came to realize what I actually really needed was to come together with my team and hold this space of safety. And when Peter talks about sort of this pinprick of hope, of light, for me, that was recognizing that we don't have to carry these burdens together, or these feelings of heaviness or sadness, but in processing it together, just feeling hope for the new year that's coming.
Yeah, I think we could have stuck with my original plan and felt like we wrapped up like all the steps of a good retro and had some actions and celebrated some things. And I know it can be tempting to blow through that reflective part of focused conversation because we don't want to spend too much time in the feelings, especially in a work context. And I think that was the thing that unlocked some pretty big business stuff for us for next year, not just personal. Like, now we feel better, but our feelings were telling us something about a part of the business that we weren't doing as effectively as we wanted, or as authentically as we wanted. And we found a way to actually work on that. So took a break, came back. I think a lot of the interpretation part happened in conversation around that. So when we came back, it went pretty quickly to, what are some things we could do to act on this emerging understanding that we have in common? And so we proposed some things, and then we interpreted the things we were proposing. Said, our intuition is telling us about these things. What are the patterns in there? So we didn't start converging of like, which one do you want to do? Let's vote on them or something. We treated our intuition about action as something to explore, and dug into that, and ultimately got to a place where we did kind of some, like, find a feature out of the idea, split it into slices we can execute on, like a lot of the tactical product management stuff that we teach, which was cool.
One thing I'll
And then,
point out about
yeah, go ahead.
this frame right here is that even though these are all blurred out, because some of this stuff should be confidential within our company, so even though these stickies are blurred out, the entire line at the bottom here is a result of that deep dive into that pinprick of like, what about this? And that's all a result, like a whole category of new steps, new actions we could take was a result of a willingness to sit in the emotion of that for a moment and work through it together to dig into what it is. And in fact, even some of the things that made it into the immediate actions are related to that. So it was pretty cool to see that over half of the ideas we had generated for what we might do differently in 2022 I don't think, would not have happened and certainly wouldn't have been expressed in such a clear way had we not been willing to take that detour into that other area and sit with the emotion for a little bit. So we did some good backlog refinement there. And then
Yep.
Angie said, but wait, I still want to celebrate, which we agreed to do.
Yeah. So we each
so we-
brainstormed 3 things that we could celebrate and talked about it a little bit and found some patterns in there.
And concluded it was a really good year and a hard year. And Peter made the comment that it's not sure it would have been as good if it had not been hard.
I think that comes from my practice of running lately and listening to a lot of elite athletes that say the race doesn't start until you go into the pain cave. And you learn so much from just chipping away, even when things are really hard, that's the real, the human part of that practice of doing distance running and things like that. That's why people do it, is because you learn so much about yourself. And for us, if we were to have a financially successful business, that's a great outcome. But at least for the 3 of us, it's at least important that the work that we do helps us grow as humans, helps us figure out better ways to make an impact on more and more lives and help, kind of spread this idea of humanizing work. And so the hardness is a key part of it. And I think a lot of times we just avoid it or try to work our way around it rather than let's dig into it and go into the pain cave, because there's probably something important for our own growth. And often that's where the ideas are generated that help us break through things that feel like intractable conflicts in our organization and our work. All right, so that's a high-level overview of what we were up to today. Kind of a snapshot of what's going on within our company and ideas that we think might be useful to others. And we hope you found that useful. And it certainly has been cathartic for me today to work through this and even to reflect on it in this video for you all. And so we hope you all have a wonderful end of year and start to your 2022. We love you, and we look forward to seeing you again in January. Thanks, everyone.